Hello everyone, Yubel Master here, aka 38 the Master One, bringing you, the Yubel community, my official Yubel deck profile that I'll be using at all of my locals and even bigger tournaments for this current format. I am so excited because tomorrow is the official release date for Phantom Nightmare, and I'm finally going to be able to build my Yubel deck that I've been theory crafting for these past 5 months since the cards were announced. Yes, that's right, this deck is a long time in the making, but I've finally settled on a build that uses a secret tech that I've learned from the OCG.
のリソースといった感じになります。続いて第1形態のユベルとナイトメアペインの組み合わせ。
And I fine-tuned it to fight back against the upcoming meta, the Age of Fire. This deck profile will be packed with surprises, so stick around to the very end because I'll be explaining all of my card choices and ratios so that this video can be as educational to you as possible. Now, first things first, you may have noticed from the thumbnail and the title that I've included quite the peculiar synchro monster. And you may be wondering, what is that card doing here? And can you even summon this in a Yubel deck? So let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the Enigmaster in the room, and explain why Enigmaster Packbit is in my extra deck. And the reason is because of the secret OCG tech that I mentioned. And the secret OCG tech is the Nadir Servant engine. That's right, we're using Nadir Servant and Dogmatica Maximus to dump useful extra deck monsters straight into the grave to assist our playstyle. I will be explaining how this works with some example combos at the end of the video, but trust me when I say that this engine gives the deck the ability to play through interruption, as well as extend our own combos further than we can usually do. And therefore it increases the ceiling of our end board by a lot. So don't forget to stick around for that demonstration at the very end of the video, and without further ado, let's get into the deck profile. So this is it. I've spent countless hours theory crafting this build, and you might even be able to tell that given the title of this deck is V4. But I do believe that this is as optimal as it gets, and I'm pretty confident in running this deck at locals. So we of course run 3 of the Samsara Lotus, which is now renamed to Samsara D Lotus for the official English translation. We also run 2 Spirit of Yubel instead of 3 because I wanted to make space in the deck, and I think that running 2 is perfectly fine, since Spirit of Yubel technically isn't a starter on its own and does need some assistance to actually get summoned on our own turn. We run 1 of each of the original Yubel forms from Phantom Darkness, so 1 Yubel, 1 Terra Incarnate, and 1 Ultimate Nightmare. I am aware that some people are cutting the Ultimate Nightmare from their lists, but personally I do like to keep it in because it does make for longer combos and gives you more options. Also, this card is anime AF, so we're keeping this no matter what. The next card is Geistgrinder Golem. We run 1 of this since it's searchable, and it is a necessary card sometimes when you need to OTK. We have 1 Unchained Soul of Shayama. We are running Unchained Soul Lord of Yama in the extra deck, which can be summoned using 2 Fiends, so we do need this in the main deck as a search target, and we can use it as discard fodder for opening the Spirit Gates, because once it's in the graveyard it serves as a self-pop to extend our combos, as well as give us extra bodies for link plays into cards like Unchained Soul of Rage. So next up we have the Yubel Spells and Traps, starting with 3 Nightmare Pain, because it's one of our starters and is pretty much the most important aspect of the deck. We have 1 Mature Chronicle and 1 Eternal Favorite because both of these are searchable and are also key parts of the Yubel strategy. I did used to run 2 of each of these cards because I used to run Pot of Desires, but I no longer think that's necessary with this particular build. Next up we have 3 Super Poly. This card is unlimited unlike the OCG where they have only 2 of it, so we run as many as we can. Although it is technically searchable by Mature Chronicle, it's also good to hard draw it because it can be used as a board breaker when going second. I have also included 2 cards to counter hand traps in the form of Triple Tactics Talent and Called by the Grave. This deck can suffer when hit by certain hand traps, so these cards definitely feel necessary. And another thing to note about Triple Tactics Talent, we are running 3 thrusts in the build, so it can be searched off of that when going second in order to break boards pretty effectively. Then we have the Sacred Beast engine in the form of 3 Opening the Spirit Gates and 3 Dark Beckoning Beasts. This mini engine is pretty much a core part of any Yubel deck in my opinion. I mean, I've even used it in the King Yubel deck I made pre-Phantom Nightmare. Just the ability to revive something once per turn, as well as the ability to recover continuous spells from the grave, is just an invaluable asset for the deck. And with cards like Nightmare Pain and Mature Chronicle, this engine is now better than ever. Next up, we have the Nadir Servant engine for the main deck. For this, we have 3 Nadir Servant and 1 Dogmatica Maximus. Now, I believe that there are 4 main ways to play Yubel in this format, and each way has their own benefits. Firstly, you can decide to run a pure Yubel build with no additional engine, so that you can fill the deck with more hand traps for interruption, or you can use more draw cards for consistency. And this is actually what I used to run in my very first deck profile I made around 4 months ago. The second option is to use a more heavy Unchained engine that includes some of the Unchained spells and traps with Unchained Soul of Shavara, and maybe even a few more of the other Unchained monsters. This allows you to have longer combos, but it also comes with its own set of weaknesses. The third way, which seems to be quite popular, is to use the Horus engine. This gives you access to rank 8s, one of which has a monster negate which you can make before you do your Yubel combo in order to protect it from hand traps. And the fourth is by using the Nadir Servant package, which I believe is the best way right now. It allows you to play through interruption similar to how the Unchained variant does, but it also gives you the ability of breaking enemy boards when going second, and it makes combos easier by just sending Yama straight to the grave, allowing you to skip the step of link summoning it. And then with Maximus, you can also send Packbit and Entis to the grave to put Spirit of Yubel into the spell and trap card zone, then pop it in the same chain using Entis, which triggers Yama in the grave to summon even more Yubels. With this many summons, you can easily get 5 counters on Mature Chronicle to search Super Polarization on your very first turn. And remember, this is even before we get the support from Legacy of Destruction. So yeah, because of this and the versatility it provides to the deck, I have chosen to run the Nadir Servant variant for this current format. Okay, let's finish up by covering the rest of the main deck now. We have 3 Peri Rias map. This card is pretty much necessary until we get the new field spell from Legacy of Destruction. It really helps with consistency by searching either Lotus or Dark Beckoning Beast depending on what you need to complete your hand. And the rest of the deck is pretty much just more non-engine. So there are 7 more slots, 3 drawn on Lockbird because it's the best hand trap right now. I don't really want to run Ash because it'll just get summoned by my opponent if they're using a fire deck and they summon Heated the Fire Charmer. We are in the Age of Fire after all, and 50% of decks are probably going to be fire related. Next up we have 3 Triple Tactics Thrust as I mentioned before, and also 1 Infinite Impermanence to search off of Triple Tactics Thrust if we're going first and we need to set a trap. I do think this card is pretty good right now, since the format is still fairly diverse outside of all of the fire decks, and this card allows you to side deck one-ofs against a wider variety of matchups. And speaking of the side deck, I think I'm going to cover that first since we are already on the topic of Triple Tactics Thrust. So let's cover the cards in reverse by starting with the 3 thrust targets on the end. We have Magic Deflector, which can stop decks such as Runic, and even stop the Fire Kings from searching using their field spell. We have Dimensional Barrier, which counters one-trick decks such as Branded. We have Herald of the Abyss, which is mainly for the Pearly matchup as an easy out to Noir without triggering the My Friend Pearly recovery effect on the continuous spell. And also, Triple Tactics Thrust is always live against a Pearly deck, because they're probably going to use their draw effect off of Sleeping Memory during the standby phase. Next up, we have 3 Soul Release. This is mainly for the fire decks to banish all of their resources, because most of their interruption comes from the graveyard, and I run 3 instead of 1 because it's better to hard draw Soul Release instead of searching it off of Thrust. This is because if you search it off of Thrust against Fire King, for example, they can just use Kirin before you activate the Soul Release that you just searched to get their Garunics out of the graves before your Soul Release resolves, meaning that your Soul Release is going to be a lot less impactful than it could have been if you hard drew it. Because if you activate Soul Release as your first card, then they can still chain Kirin to Soul Release, but they won't be able to get Garunix out of the grave because Garunix has to trigger on a new chain, and will just get banished on the resolution of Soul Release. So next up we have 3 Ultimate Slayer. This works as a good board breaker going second because we are already running the extra deck cards we need to for the Nadir Servant. So we basically already have the cards we need to get that extra value when using Ultimate Slayer. Next up we run 3 Cosmic Cyclone in the side deck. This is for decks like Labyrinth and some of the more rogue decks that rely on continuous spells and traps as floodgates. But it is also fairly effective against Fire Kings because you can banish their field spell, which has a mandatory effect to wipe their own board. I also decided on running 3 anti-spell in the side deck. I will usually side this in when going first, during game 2 or 3. So one of this deck's main weaknesses is mass spell and trap removal. If you get Lightning Stormed or Harpy's Feather Dusted, then all of your follow-up is gone and all of your super polys are gone, and your opponent is no longer forced to attack because Nightmare Pain is also gone. There is just no in-engine protection for this situation. So initially I thought of siding in Solemn Judgment to negate spells and traps with mass back row removal. But then I realized, why negate it by paying half my life points when I can just run anti-spell and prevent them from being activated in the first place? Although anti-spell does hurt your own plays, you can still use Super Poly since it was set before the resolution of anti-spell. And also during your turn, if you need to activate spells, there are multiple ways in the deck to pop your own anti-spell fragrance, such as Elder Entity Entis, Unchained Soul Lord of Yama, and Unchained Soul of Shayama. So yeah, anti-spell does work pretty well in this deck. Also, going back to the Cosmic Cyclone, you can also chain Cosmic Cyclone to an opponent's anti-spell, since it's a quick play spell card, which can save you losing in game 2s, if your opponent is also siding anti-spell fragrance. Anyway, let's finally cover the all-important extra deck. We have 2 of the new Yubel fusion. Its official English name is Yubel the Loving Defender Forever. If you want to know my thoughts on that, do check out my video I did make on the reveals, which I'll link in the description below. Next up, we have Mud Dragon for a super poly target if we need to break some boards. And similarly, we have Garura for another super poly target. But in this deck, it's mainly used for the Nadir Servant engine as an extra draw. And speaking of Nadir Servant targets, we also have Elder Entity Entis, which pops a card whenever it's sent to the grave. This can be on either field, so you can pop your own Yubel cards to extend your combos. Next up, we have Enigmaster Packbit, which is a secret rare from Phantom Nightmare. When this card is sent to the graveyard, you can discard 1 card to crystallize a monster on your opponent's field for removal, or 1 monster from your own graveyard to set up more Yubel combos, which I will be demonstrating at the end of the video. Next up, we have Golden Cloud Beast Malong to bounce an opponent's card when it's sent to the graveyard, and also Meriologic Aggregator to negate the effects of a face-up card when it's sent to the graveyard. So those are our Nadir Servant and Ultimate Slayer targets. Next up, we have 2 XYZs that are actually summoned in this deck. We have Gustav Max to help with our OTK plays, and Typhon Sky Crisis to get out of sticky situations. And the rest of the extra deck is made up of Link monsters, and for those we have 2 Unchained Soul Lord of Yamas, one of them to actually summon and search our Shayama, and the other one to dump off of Nadir Servant to use its grave effect. We also have Unchained Soul of Rage, which is one of the best endboard cards in the game right now because of SP Little Knight, which of course we also run in the deck as our next card. And finally, we have Muckracker from the Underworld to round off our extra deck. So yeah, you may have noticed that this deck isn't exactly budget friendly, especially with cards like SP Little Knight and Triple Tactics Thrust. I do plan on making a budget Yubel deck in the future, but for now, if you're a budget player, you can just cut out the Thrusts and the Ultimate Slayers for different staple cards such as DD Crow or Skullmeister. And for the case of SP Little Knight, you can replace it with a Nightmare Unicorn, since it is a dark monster and can be summoned off of Soul of Rage still. Anyway, now that we've covered the deck profile, let's show off some of the combos using Nadir Servant. We all know that you can use Nadir Servant to search Maximus, sending a total of 3 extra deck cards to the graveyard, which can be used to break your opponent's board when going second, since that's what we discussed when covering the extra deck cards. But in this example, I want to show you how you can use Nadir Servant in order to play through Interruption, specifically when your opponent tries to use Infinite Impermanence on a key starter for the deck, which is Samsara D. Lotus. Pretty cool, right? If you have Nadir Servant, we now no longer need to worry about Lotus getting impermed. So this second example, which I'm about to show you, will show you exactly how you can integrate the extra deck dumps into your combo when going first. Now, this is going to be quite fast, so feel free to pause the video if you need to. So yeah, pretty impressive end board, right? Now, if that was too fast for you, don't worry, because eventually I will be making some more in-depth guides which can explain some more basic combos, as well as general strategies that are more suitable for new players. But otherwise, I do hope that this illustrated exactly how useful the Nadir Servant package is for a Yubel deck, and why the Nadir Servant package is my go-to choice for playing Yubel right now. So yeah, that was my deck profile, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Also, feel free to share any suggestions you have for the deck, and also any questions you have down there too. I will be sure to reply and help anyone out there in the Yubel community. Tomorrow is when my boxes of Phantom Nightmare will arrive. I'm just so excited. So I will be making an opening video for Phantom Nightmare, but it's not going to be like any other normal box opening video, because I'm going to be opening Phantom Nightmare packs until I can build this very deck that I've just showcased. That's right, we're going to keep on opening Phantom Nightmare packs until I get all of the Yubel cards I need for the deck, including the secret rare Enigmaster Packbit. And maybe if we're lucky, we might even pull some quarter century rare cards too. So hopefully we do manage to get all the cards we need before I go bankrupt. Fingers crossed, and wish me luck, everyone. Please do subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you don't want to miss that exciting video, as well as many more Yubel related videos to come in the future. So with that, I thank you all for watching and supporting the channel so far. You guys have been really great to me in growing the channel, and I really appreciate every member of the Yubel community. So with that, I'll see you all in the next video.